Chapter 8 of Nip and Tuck by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8, in which Tuck has a pair of interesting callers. As we have seen, the market had enjoyed a steady rise for several weeks. Then came the break in COD, which, however, stopped around par, for the stock was too good an investment to get very far down the scale. A great many timid speculators, many with shallow purses, were frightened or forced out of the street by the bear raid. Notwithstanding this, there was some very good buying on the decline. Neither Nip nor Tuck took a hand in this on his own account, nor in the interests of Miss Joyce, whose original capital and winnings remained in their hands. The boys, fully satisfied with the profit they had made out of the boom, were contented to lay on their oars and wait for something better to come up. About 11 o'clock one morning, Peter Klein, Tuck's messenger, knocked on the door of his boss's private office. "Come in," said the boy broker, who was lazily reading the previous day's stock exchange quotations and making sundry comparison of prices on a pad at his elbow. "Two ladies, sir, to see you," said Klein with a slight grin on his usually solemn countenance. "Ask them to step in here," requested Tuck, wondering who his visitors were. A moment later, Klein ushered a couple of handsomely dressed and decidedly pretty girls into his sanctum. "Why, Miss Joyce!" exclaimed Tuck, leaping from his chair as if propelled upward by a spring. "This is certainly an unexpected pleasure." "Are you really glad to see me?" she replied with a tinkling laugh, as she extended one of her daintily gloved hands to him. "Am I? Say!" "Allow me to introduce to you Miss Clark," she interrupted with a roguish glance at him. "Mira, this is Mr. George Tuck." Mira Clark acknowledged the introduction with a smile and a bow, while Tuck expressed himself as highly delighted to make Miss Clark's acquaintance. "When did you come to town?" asked Tuck after the girls were seated. "Oh, Aunt and I came back last Saturday," replied Laura with a smile. "Well, I must say it's like a ray, I should say a couple of rays, of sunshine to have you young ladies honor my office with your presence," said Tuck gallantly. "How poetical you are," laughed Laura with dancing eyes. "Isn't he?" smiled Miss Clark. "One can't help feeling poetical when he comes under the bewitching influence of two pair of lovely eyes, you know," responded the young broker. "Worse and worse," rippled Laura. "I'm afraid you're an awful flatterer, Mr. Tuck." "He certainly is very complimentary," smiled Miss Clark. "It's a gentleman's duty to be complimentary to the ladies, isn't it?" asked Tuck. "Don't you like to be admired, Miss Joyce?" "Well, now," blushed the charming miss, "you're bringing the subject right home to me, aren't you? I believe it's a weakness of our sex. But I think we might talk about something else, the weather, for instance," and she shot a sly look at the handsome young broker. "Pshaw! Anybody can see it's a pleasant day, and it is made all the brighter by your—" "Now!" and Laura held up one finger warningly. "I beg your pardon," Tuck hastened to say. "I quite forgot that compliments are tabooed. By the way, did you call on Mr. Nip?" "Mr. Nip!" exclaimed Laura, looking just the least bit confused. "Sure, Nicholas Nip. He's a particular friend of mine. Told me he met you at Orangetown during his week's vacation." "Is it possible? And you know him? How very funny." Miss Joyce looked at her friend and giggled. "It must be funny if you say so," said Tuck. "But really, I don't see the joke myself." "In answer to your question," replied Laura merrily, "I will say that I haven't seen him yet." "From which I infer that it is a pleasure yet in reserve for him." "Well, yes, if you put it that way." "He's a lucky boy." "You don't seem to appreciate the fact that we have called on you first," said Laura demurely. "If you only knew just how much I do appreciate it, why—" "Now don't get conceited, Mr. Tuck. How do you know but I just tossed a penny to see which of you two gentlemen should have the honor of the first call?" "Well, if you did that, Miss Joyce, I certainly have reason to bless my luck for turning you in this direction. But I'd rather think you called on me first of your own accord." "I'm not making any confession, Mr. Tuck, so I won't tell you whether it was by luck or design that we came to see you first. You have a very handsome little office, hasn't he, Mira?" "Yes, indeed," replied the young lady, and both the girls gazed around the private office with an approving eye. "This is my sheep-shearing den," explained Tuck. "Your what?" exclaimed both of the girls in a breath. "My sheep-shearing den," replied the boy broker in an amused tone. "Pray, what do you mean by that?" asked Laura, opening her eyes very wide with womanly curiosity. "Well, you see, when lambs come to Wall Street, they always bring their fleece with them. It is a point of honor among the brokers to relieve them of their superfluous wool, as a lesson for them to stay away in the future." Of course, Tuck was only jollying the girl, as a fellow will do sometimes when it happens to hit his humor. Laura, however, looked much mystified. "I can't quite see the point, Mr. Tuck," she said. "I wasn't aware lambs were brought to Wall Street to be shorn. We didn't see a single one on the street, did we, Mira?" Miss Clark shook her head, while Tuck sniggered quietly. "Now, Mr. Tuck," pouted Laura, "I am sure you are just making fun of us. Won't you please explain the joke?" "Well, Miss Joyce, outsiders who come into Wall Street to speculate are called lambs, and the money they bring with them to invest in margins or in other methods looking to their enrichment is facetiously termed fleece. See?" "Oh!" exclaimed both of the girls together. "That is certainly much more intelligible, Mr. Tuck," added Laura, smiling. "I suppose I'm a lamb, then, for I sent you $500 to invest for me in stock, and it seems I've turned out one of the lucky few." "That's right. You will understand how lucky you have been when I say that it is clearly understood among brokers that of their clients who put up a margin for speculative purposes, 90% of them will lose it." "Is it possible?" ejaculated Laura in surprise. "It is a fact. It's not unusual practice, therefore, for brokers to copper the transactions of their customers, by which I mean that if you were to order a broker to buy for you 100 shares of a certain stock, he would sell 100 simultaneously at the same price. Instead of using his own judgment, he would depend on your want of judgment. That is, he would bet on the folly of the person dealing with him, and the wisdom and the profit of it are shown in the frightful percentage that menaces all who deposit a speculative margin in Wall Street." "That is certainly flattering to the customer. Did you do that way with my $500? "Well, no, Miss Joyce, I did not. I used your money to the best advantage my judgment dictated, for I did not want you to lose it if I could help it. But for all that, the chances were decidedly against you." "I am very much obliged to you, Mr. Tuck, for the interest you took in my poor little investment," said Laura gratefully. "Don't mention it, Miss Joyce. I did the same by you as I would have done by a dear sister, if I had one, which I regret to say I haven't." "You are very good to say so," she replied, looking at him in a way that threatened him with a slight attack of palpitation of the heart. "I assure you that it was a great pleasure to do you a favor, Miss Joyce, especially as the result was so satisfactory." Laura smiled, but did not say anything. "I think Wall Street is a very interesting place," spoke up Miss Clark. "Undoubtedly, to an observer." "It seems to me that the business done down here is very like gambling," went on the young lady. "If you sift it down, that's about what it is. That's what all speculation is. In Wall Street, it is a game of chance in 9 cases out of 10. You bet your money that a certain stock goes up, it goes the other way, and you lose. It always seems to go the other way with most people." "But you have been very fortunate, Mr. Tuck," said Laura. "You told me that you had cleared up a good many $1,000 on the recent rise." "That's right. But I was fortunate in capturing a tip at the very beginning." "And I understand Mr. Nip has made a good bit of money, too, recently?" "I believe he's done so." "Did he also write you to that effect?" "Now you want to know too much," Laura said, laughing and blushing at the same time. "Well," said Tuck with a slight twinge of jealousy, "I suppose I haven't any right to complain. It is quite possible you may also have given him a little commission to execute, the same as you favored me with. If you did, I hope it turned out equally as lucky." Laura smiled, but did not say whether she had done so or not. Tuck then proposed to send for Nip, and after a slight demur on Laura's part, was permitted to do so. Nip appeared in about 5 minutes, and to say that he was surprised at seeing Laura Joyce in Tuck's sanctum would but feebly express his feelings. He was duly presented to Miss Clark, and seemed to be much impressed by her beauty and sprightliness. In the course of half an hour, Tuck proposed that they all go over to Delmonico's to lunch together. Miss Joyce at first declared that she could not think of such a thing, but Nip had made such progress with Miss Clark that Laura's objections, if she really had any, were overruled, and the quartet set out for the famous restaurant. End of chapter 8.